This is Courage Barbell. I'm your host, Chad Ikes. Just decided to go ahead and run into a second video right here because I have some notes. And I thought, well, let's just get it done right now. Please like the channel. Please subscribe to the channel. Please share the channel. Please comment on the channel. As I said in my last video, I just got caught up on everything. I always try to listen to your guys' comments and to respond to them. And actually, today's topic is a topic that Helmet asked me a while back in one of the comments. And I honestly just wanted to say Helmet because I think it's a cool name. But it was actually a pretty good question. And he's asked me a lot of other questions, which I'm always trying to take into consideration what you guys are looking for, because I'm doing this to help you guys out. So if you guys there's something specific you want, I can't guarantee I'll get to it right away, but it will definitely go into memory banks and in my notes to at some point get a video out on that specific topic. So the topic today is conjugate for beginners and conjugate for mid-level lifters, and kind of an idea of how to tweak conjugate. Conjugate is... I find in strength sports things get butchered a lot. Names of exercises, training programs, what this is, what that is. Like Romanian deadlifts. I don't know how many versions of Romanian deadlifts I see or how many versions of face pulls I see. Everybody kind of has their own tweak and twist on things, and that's fine. But sometimes new lifters come in and like, oh, this is how I got to do it. This is how I got to do it. And conjugate is one of those ones that's been tweaked and twisted so many times in so many ways. Basically, conjugate method means you're trying to train multiple methods at the same time. I train a version of conjugate that you can say it's basically a West Side barbell version. That's when I really got into powerlifting and learned a lot. That was the systems or the methods that I learned and I liked and that made sense to me. I originally started with 5x5. I did a lot of 12-week waves and linear periodization. None of that stuff really worked for me. I didn't really like the concepts and ideas of it. When I started researching conjugate, that made sense to me with my background as an athlete and a thrower. It really made sense to me, and even my background in physical therapy, because some of the things I learned in physical therapy, I put into my conjugate training. So I learned the West Side style from guys that trained West Side. And I then had to modify it. It didn't work for me right away. Parts of it worked and parts didn't. And I kept consulting with guys that I knew and bouncing ideas and questions. And we just kept tweaking it and twisting it. But if you were to ask me, well, okay, what's West Side conjugate? I would basically say that is max effort days and dynamic days with a lot of GPP work in between. The standard template is everything's based around the squat, deadlift, and the bench. They don't really you don't call it an upper body day in conjugate. You call it a bench day. And then you call it a squat and deadlift day. And then you split those days up into max effort or dynamic. So really there's four training days. You have dynamic bench, dynamic squat. Then you have max effort bench, max effort squat. On the original template that I learned, you would do those in a 7-day period. Days off, you would do GPP work or recovery work, or you may come in and do a main session in the morning and do some recovery work in the afternoon. And that's the basic outline. It really is that simple of an outline. Now, I found that 7 days was never enough for me to recover. I spread it out. The stronger I got, the more recovery I needed. The more intense my sessions were, more recovery. So we ended up spreading it out over time. And in our society as humans, we tend to get stuck in ruts and stuck on one path. And we have a hard time veering off of that. And we have a hard time opening our minds to see other things. I'm not quite sure why our whole society runs on a 7-day schedule. I don't really like a 7-day schedule. I don't like working 5 and getting 2 off. I'd rather work 5 and get 4 off. Or work 4 and get 5 off. Or work 3 and get 4 off. That would still be a 7-day schedule, but it'd be a different 7-day schedule. So when I started with Conjugate, we started training, and I started needing to tweak it to keep making gains. I thought, why does it have to be 7 days? Why do we make all of our training based on 7 days? Like 7 days doesn't work for me. I'd rather sleep in 3 or 4 days and then I would feel better. So I kind of threw away that whole 7-day idea and we started playing with why not? Why can't it be 8 days? Why can't it be 10 days? And, I know if you have families and if you're living your life on a 7-day, it's easier to plan your training that way. But you can also there's lots of ways to modify it and tweak it. And when I learned Conjugate, I don't know if I was intentionally taught it this way or if I came up with this concept. Probably a little bit of both. The Conjugate is an outline. It's a bunch of different rules to follow, but you have to take those rules and twist and tweak them to fit you. And that's hard when you're a beginner, especially if you're a beginner in powerlifting or if you're a beginner in lifting. That can be very difficult to learn, and you don't have the ideas to back up what's really, you don't have any concept. You've never done anything. By the time I came to Conjugate, I've trained every other possible way there was. I didn't powerlift till I was 27 or 28, so I had been lifting since I was like 14. So I already had a background and I already had lots of other concepts and ideas in my head that I could twist and turn with that. So some of the questions that Helmet had asked me, let me rip my notes apart here. One of the questions was the best program or template for beginners. I don't think there is a best program for beginners. I think any program can work for a beginner. When you're a beginner, anything works. If you just go in the gym and start lifting randomly, you will get stronger and you will make gains. Now, we want to do this efficiently and we want to learn as we go and we want to build and get better, and some programs will work better for others. But I still am not sure that there is a set program for beginners. I am a huge fan of 531, which is Jim Wendler's programs. I think that's awesome for young athletes and young lifters, people new to the sport, because they get to work a lot of reps. They get to kind of get an idea of percentages. They do a lot more reps to work on technique. And they're not actually doing single rep max stuff. They're doing a lot of AMRAP stuff. And I think that builds a lot of good strength. And with young athletes, I think that builds better ligament and tendon strength. Have I put people on Conjugate right off the bat? Hell yeah, I have. I think Conjugate is a great beginner program too, because it's going to allow you to start developing force and learning how to develop force through the dynamic training. And it's going to work you through a greater range of motion. And then on the max effort side of it, you may not get the reps in that you would with, say, a 5x5 program or even a general 3 sets of 10 strength program. But you're still going to, now you're going to get a chance to lift some heavier weight, to stress that central nervous system a little bit and start training your body to really strain. So it's kind of a catch-22. All programs have benefits and faults. So I think Conjugate is a perfect beginner program. One of the other questions was, how do you do max effort for the beginner? Well, the one foundational thing that is so important is technique, getting the right technique. And how do you get good technique? Well, first of all, learning and understanding what good technique is, and then attrition. Pound it, pound it, pound it, pound it, pound it. You got to do rep after rep after rep, and you got to get them all perfect. But if you always go light, you're going to have great technique light. And you're going to fall apart when it gets heavy because you're going to have weak points. So you need to get the technique down. Then you need to push the technique with the heavy weights and find those weak links so that you can fix them. So what I like to do is, if I have a beginner on max effort exercises, the first thing is don't take as big a jumps when you're warming up. People tend to just warm up and then they think that they can worry about their technique when it gets heavy. No. if you get under an empty bar in a squat, that is a perfect chance to work your technique. Every single rep needs to be the same no matter what. So a warm-up is not just a warm-up. A warm-up is working on your technique. It's perfecting your technique. So if we're doing a max effort exercise, say you're not that strong. Say you're doing a box squat. Well, if you only box squat 300 pounds and you're taking 100-pound jumps, you're going to get there really fast. So for a beginner, they need to do smaller jumps in their warm-up so that they're getting more warm-ups in, which is also going to help build their endurance and work their general strength. So you're going to do smaller jumps going up. Whereas, say, when I was at my prime, squatting 1,200 pounds, I would do the bar, 135, 225, and then it would be 200 or 300 pound jumps. I wasn't going to waste a whole shit ton. It would take me forever to make 50-pound jumps to get where I need to be. But I didn't do 200-pound jumps when I started. I did 20-pound jumps or 50-pound jumps. When I was a mid-level, I would do plates till I get there. So treat your warm-ups like it's technique work. It is part of the training session. The training doesn't start when you get heavy. The training starts when you get in the gym. Do more warm-ups when you're not as strong. Then as you're learning technique, we're going to come to the point where your technique's going to completely fail because it's just too heavy. You haven't developed the strength to do that. But you still kind of need to push into that area. So I don't mind 1 or 2 attempts if there's a little bit of fault in the technique, because you got to kind of push it to that level. But there needs to be a line where it's like, no, you're done. Like you barely got that one. Your technique looked horrible. You're done for the day. Let's move on. But we know where your weak points are, and we can adjust that in our supplemental training. A beginner also needs to run more waves in their max effort programs. So most of my time training Conjugate, we switched. Every max effort session was different. We were switching all the time. But when I started doing max effort Conjugate training, I would run 3-week waves. So if we were doing, say, a suspended safety squat bar good morning, we were going to do that for 3 weeks. The next 3 max effort sessions were going to be like that. First of all, because a lot of the exercises were new. We were learning new technique and working on a lot of stuff. So your first session with a new movement is like, oh, okay, you're just getting used to the movement. Like you're easily going to PR in the second session. And you're probably going to end up being a whole lot sore. Third session, you're probably going to PR again because now you're even more used to it. You're comfortable with it mentally. You know what's going on. Your body's already adapting to it a little bit. And then if you tried it on a 4th session, you probably would not PR because now you need to change. So I run all of for beginners, I try to run them all for a max effort session in a 3-week wave or week or cycle. So, if you're doing 8-day or 10-day, then it's every 10th day on that max effort exercise for 3 sessions. I think that's very important just to get used to the movements. And as you get more comfortable with the movements, as you gain strength, as you become an intermediate or medium level lifter, you can start switching it up more. Run them once a week and just switch every week based on kind of what your weaknesses are. With advanced lifters, we always went to a 1-rep max. Again, with a new lifter, I'm not so concerned to push that 1-rep max. I would honestly rather have a 3-rep max, maybe even a 5-rep max. So you're going to work up to inevitably what you can do for 5. But what I find is that most athletes, if I tell them we're working to a 5-rep max, they'll end up going to about a 4-rep max. So I try to kind of play that little head game when I'm setting up their programs to see where they're at. Because the 3, 4, 5, whatever, man. 1 rep's not going to make a whole damn shitload of difference. But what that's going to do is that's going to give them more reps, and it's going to allow their coach or me to go, hey, if you're doing 4, I can see in that one set where you're going to start to fail. And then I'll be able to better see what the weak points are when you're failing right there. Because coaching new people is a little different than coaching middle and advanced. Once people have technique down, that really makes it easy seeing what they need to work on, seeing what their weak points are, and no, is he just doesn't have his head in the game today, and I need to get him to focus, or is it really that this is his max? When they're new, there's just so much to learn, and their technique sucks so bad anyway. Sometimes it's hard to tell, did he fail because he wasn't focused, or did he fail because it was actually a physical failure in his technique? If you do 3, 4, or 5 rep maxes, that helps you out with that. And again, it gives that lifter a little lighter weight to continue to work on his technique and get those extra reps in to really sink in the technique that he should be using. There was a question about using dynamic to learn technique. Here's another thing, and I believe I talked about this in one of my other videos, where the first time I did dynamic effort bench with Dave Tate, he stopped me after like 6 sets. And I had in my head I was doing 10. And I wanted to finish no matter what. And Dave pointed out that I was already getting tired. My speed was slowing down. My technique was starting to go to shit. Like, it was time to stop. But you got to remember, even the first time I started doing Conjugate and the first time I trained with Dave, I still had a background in lifting. You know, I was still a 400 plus bench presser. So you couldn't really say that I was a beginner back then. The thing is most beginners don't really know how to generate force. So where an advanced lifter knows how to generate force. An advanced lifter can do a lower percentage of his, say, 1 rep max and get more out of that rep because he knows how to generate force. He knows how to put a 1,000-pound squat into a 500-pound bar. And every set and every rep that he does, he's pushing his body further and further and further. So you'll find that as you advance and as you get stronger, you may have done, say, 10 sets of 3 in your dynamic bench when you started. Now you're going to be doing 6 and you're going to be toast because you know how to push your body that much further. So the big difference on dynamic with the beginner is going to be the amount of sets. So like, I'll start a lot of my beginners between 10 and 12 sets. But of course, when I work with them in person, it's better because I can watch each set and I can stop them. They may have had a bad day, a shitty night, and I stop them at 8. They may have a great day and I stop them at 12. But I'm there looking at their technique. I'm looking at their speed. I'm looking at what's going on, reading them. But generally speaking, a newer lifter is going to be able to do more. So I'm going to start them out at 10 to 12 and then adjust from there. Normally, I don't think I've ever went past 12, even with like UFC MMA fighters. I don't want to go past 12. That's plenty. But then that, of course, that gives them more reps. That gives them more time to work on technique and more time to learn how to generate speed. When I have an advanced lifter, he already knows how to generate force. I'm not teaching him how to generate force, but I'm trying to keep his body to where it produces. He can continue to produce as much force as possible. Well, I can do that in a whole lot less sets. I don't need all those extra sets. So the dynamic with a newer athlete is going to be basically more sets. Now, when talking about accommodating resistance, it kind of depends on their strength. Quite honestly, if you're working with 150 pounds, yeah, we might put a little bit of band tension on there, but it's not going to be that big of a deal at that point. It's really to just work generated speed. And when somebody can come out from a box squat so fast that they can launch 50% of their max effort off of their back, yeah, you better have some accommodating resistance on there, chains or bands. I'm not so worried about it at first. I mean, I think I always put like a mini on there or something like that, just so there is some accommodating resistance. But it's not like this huge big thing where it's like if I take a beginner and I start him out on accommodating resistance, he's going to have a huge difference. It doesn't matter. Just work on generating the force and work on exploding all the way through the lift. So, yeah, that's pretty simple. Max effort, 3-week waves, 3 to 5 reps. I want to say, let's go back to the max effort really quick. Good morning variations are really, really, really important. It just builds the posterior chain. If you do a good morning properly, it is the beginning of the squat. And it will teach you how to start the squat and get comfortable with it and get comfortable with lifting the weight. But you also have to train the whole technique, the technique of the pick, the technique for holding the position, the technique of the walkout if you're walking out, the technique of the monolift if you're using a monolift. Beginners, it's all about technique. Technique. You want to hammer that in on them. And the good morning variation, like people go, well, conjugate's good for geared lifting. It's not good for raw. BS. It's good for both. Yeah, there's a few little tweaks. You may not do quite as many. If I'm a geared guy, I'm going to do 80% of my max effort's going to be some form of a good morning. If I'm a raw lifter, I'm going to throw in more full range movements than I necessarily need with a geared lifter. But it's all basically the same. With the dynamic stuff, percentages. This one's a little difficult because I actually trained percentages and the waves and stuff when I first started. But I pretty quickly found out that it's like, who cares? Like, I don't give a shit what the percentages are. Like, how fast is it moving? Like, I can look at somebody and go, it's not fast enough. Either you need to get faster or we need to drop the weight or we need to change the accommodating resistance. So I never really gave a shit if they're doing the exact percentage. How fast is the bar moving? How much force are they generating? So I always play with that. But then again, you're talking about having an experienced coach right there going, yes, this more, yes, more or less. And you have somebody actually watching your speed. Now, if you can afford, I can't remember the name of them, but the apparatus that judges your speed, you can look into that and find out, hey, what is the exact speed? I actually have one right here that I have not got to play with from Kabuki Strength, but I'll get on that, and then when I get that figured out, I will let you guys know exactly what I'm finding out about that. So generally speaking, 50%. Start with 50% of your max. If your best squat is 300 pounds, start with 150, 160 pounds. What I do is I'll start a person at say I start him at 150 pounds. I'm going to look at him and see how his speed is. And I'm going to go, okay, speed's not bad right there. Let's add a little more weight. And I'll add a little more weight. And if the speed doesn't drop, okay, add a little more weight. And I'll go right to the point where his speed really starts to drop. And that's pretty much where we're going to stay. And then I'm going to go, okay, now I want you to get as fast with that weight as you were. And then as it goes, then we'll add accommodating resistance in. Then we'll maybe add, go from bands to chains, whatever. And you start mixing it at that. And then another guy may put 50% and I'm like, man, that's slow as shit. Like we gotta, okay, let's take the weight down. And I'll take the weight down and see if he increases in speed. If he does increase in speed, then I'm going to take him down to where speed's really good and then maybe bump him up a little bit and go, okay, now I want you to generate more speed with that weight. That's what we got to get you to do. And then, of course, we'll keep bumping it up and we'll bump it up. So we're kind of playing at where are they at? Because I've had people that are just fast as shit. And like you take them up to 70, 80%, they're just as fast as they were at 50. So why would I want to train them at a way lighter weight than I need to? And I've had people that are slow as shit. And like, okay, if I want to teach this guy how to generate speed, I can't load him up with weight. I got to drop him down so he can actually move fast. A good way to explain this is I have a good friend of mine who ended up helping. He was a BMX rider. He got into powerlifting. He learned West Side and Conjugate and became a really strong, really good lifter. And then he ended up going back and coaching BMX again and helping the U.S. team with their strength training. And one of the things we had talked about one time was basically training Conjugate on a BMX bike. Like train sprinting uphill. And then train sprinting downhill. And when you're sprinting downhill, you're basically training dynamic because you're going to have you have gravity's helping you generate speed. So now your pedals are going to go that much faster. So you have to learn how to pedal faster to keep up and keep generating the same force going downhill. And it's actually really cool because I think they had really good results with that, getting the BMX guys to actually be able to pedal faster. So that's the same thing we're trying to do in the weight. We're trying to get you to generate force. And then even when you go to your max effort, you're generating force. Take a regular bench press. If I take 225 in there and go as slow as I can, I'm still going to be like, that sucked. That was kind of hard. Or if I go bam, it's like, oh, it was easy. So you want to be able to generate that force and get that force going as quickly as possible. So that's what we're looking for with dynamic work. Really, that's the basics of conjugate for a beginner. Now, the things to remember is as you move up and as you continue to get stronger, it's important to remember that once your technique gets better, you lift more weight just because of your technique. Once your central nervous system gets trained to weights and strength training and heavy weights, it will actually fire your muscles harder and faster. You will recruit deeper muscle fibers. So every time you lift, you're taxing your body more. So with your dynamic work, your percentages are going to go up. With your max effort work, now you're lifting heavier and you have more warm-ups in there. So your volume is actually going up as well. So the stronger you get, the more it's recovery you're going to need because you've developed and you've trained your body to give you more. Well, it's giving you more. It's taxing itself more. So you're going to need more recovery. So just keep in mind that as you get stronger, it's not about, oh, I'm going to lift more, I'm going to lift more, I'm going to lift more, I'm going to lift more often. That's not the case. You're not going to lift more often. You're not going to lift more frequently. Your volume is going to go up to a point, and then that's where it's going to be. I don't think you can continue to gain strength and continue to increase your volume. Your volume is going to increase. I've actually written papers about this where when you squatted 400 pounds and when you squat 800 pounds, how much if you do the exact same training session, your volume goes up tremendously. So keep that in mind. People are like, well, I'm training less. No, you're actually doing more. So keep that in mind as you continue to grow. And that'll also come into play when you're dynamic with your dynamic work. You may start out doing sets of 12, keep increasing weight, getting stronger, and that may end up dropping. Like in my biggest competition days, I generally did six sets of my dynamic work, maybe 8 if it was a good day. And that was about it. And some days it may have been 5, and I was like, nope, done, that's it. Because you're just pushing so hard. If you're an 800-pound bench presser, but you're bench pressing 300 pounds with bands, well, you're still putting, if you're doing it right and you're trained, you're still putting 800 pounds of force in each bench press. So you're basically doing 800-pound bench presses for however many reps and sets. So that's just more stuff to keep in mind. Keep in mind that you'll be able to change your max effort. You'll be adjusted to pretty much anything. And even when you pick up new exercises at that point, if you do happen to find a new one, your body's going to adapt to it quickly because you've done it so many times. What were some of the other points I had about that? Oh, once you learn how to generate force, there's going to be a point where you're not really going to generate that much more force. So I got to the point where I was using anywhere from 245 to maybe probably like 285 on my dynamic bench press. And I was in that same window about from the time I benched 6 to the time I benched over 8. And well, I didn't hit an official 9, but I was getting ready. I was doing 9 in training before I tore my tricep. So even at a 600-pound bencher to a 900-pound bencher, I was still doing my dynamic work with 225. I just kept trying to get as much force into it as I could. And I'm sure it got faster, but at that point, your speed increases are just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It gets harder and harder. Just like when you first started squatting, making a 50-pound jump was no big deal. If you squat 1,200 pounds, making a 50-pound jump is a big deal. It's not going to come as fast as it did. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And you got to remember, it's all about recovery. The big thing is recovery. And as you get stronger and you start spreading your main sessions out, what you want to do is you want to pick up more GPP sessions and more recovery sessions. So if you're like, man, I'm training 8 days a week, I'm just beating the hell out of myself. Maybe I need to switch this out to a 12-day instead of a 10-day. Or did I say 8 day to a 12-day? Well, now you're going to have those days in there that aren't main lifting days. So add in some sled dragging, add in some ring work, add in some medicine ball work. We get really caught up in the idea that we have to pound heavy weights all the time. And we don't. We don't have to pound heavy weights all the time. Those heavy weights take a tremendous toll on our body. They beat up our tendons, our ligaments. They stress out our central nervous system. Like, you want to do everything you can to recover, but there's still a point where it's like your body can only do so much. But we get caught that that's what we have to do. We have to go heavy. That's the only way I'm going to get stronger is going heavy. And you do need to go heavy to get stronger. But you can get stronger doing lighter work. So I try to, when I'm consulting with guys and trying to look at their program and what they're doing and get them to start making gains again, because I have guys call me who are stuck, and some guys are contemplating stopping lifting altogether when they don't need to stop lifting. What they need to do is change their program. There's a reason they're stuck, and we just need to figure out what it is. A lot of times it's from doing too much. And once I can convince them to back off and go, listen, how many good heavy sessions do you have right now? They're like, most of them suck. Okay, well, would you rather spread it out and those heavy sessions are awesome and fun again? Or would you rather try to even do more sometimes and just beat the shit out of yourself where they all suck? Most of them are like, well, I'd rather have good sessions. So spread it out. Come into those good sessions more recovered and ready to go and really push to a max effort where you're supposed to than not. And if you're like me and you get that mental block where you have to be in the gym all the time, that's a good time to add in these smaller sessions. I know it's hard to fathom that doing sled can actually help you squat heavier weight, but it can. And all these smaller sessions, supplemental GPP, and especially if you're still thinking about your weak points, these are perfect opportunities to pick up strength in the weak points. So don't get caught in that trap of I have to pound heavy weights all the time. It's all about pounding heavy weights. More. It's not. Make those heavy sessions count. Make them awesome. Make them good. And then come in and do a lot of that lighter work, the supplemental type work, the GPP work. That is all going to add to it. And then those heavy sessions are just going to keep getting better and better and better. So remember, what works now isn't going to work later. What I did to get to a 400-pound bench press did not get me to a 500-pound bench press. It did not get me to a 600-pound bench press. What got me to a 600-pound bench press did not get me to a 7. If you look over my whole powerlifting career, I always trained Conjugate. I have trained 531 and some other stuff, but basically I was always doing Conjugate. But it changed. The whole time it always changed. It continued to evolve. It continued to grow and tweak. And even now, when I start people, I won't start everybody at the same place. I'll start people at different places. And I've also learned how to put people in the same program, but kind of tweak their training a little bit. So, Conjugate is an outline, and keep that in mind from the beginning. Don't get caught up in this is the way it is. This works right now. And I hear that. People are like, well, this always worked for me. It worked for me before. I'm like, you benched 400 pounds before. Now you bench 500 pounds. What makes you think that same thing is going to work? Keep your mind open. We want to keep our muscles flexible and mobile, and we don't want them to get hard. We want them to be soft. And our brain's the same way. Don't let your brain get rigid. Don't let it get hard and like a rock. Keep it mobile. Keep it flexible. Keep the ability to change ideas and bend and flex and learn and continue to learn throughout your career. All the great powerlifters I know continue to learn, and even when they stop competing at the world-class level, they still want to learn. They actually enjoy learning about it, even if they're not necessarily using it. They'll use it on their clients or use it for somebody else. I don't know how long I've been talking about this shit, but I'm going to wrap it up because this is too long a video. Please like the channel, subscribe to the channel, share the channel, comment on the channel. Please head on over to couragebarbell.com, pick up a hat, pick up a shirt, pick up some stickers. This is one of my cool ones, favorite ones. I actually modified this from the old days when I used to sell t-shirts. Yeah, I think we're good, fellas. Hope everybody's doing great. And I wish you all a good day, and I'm out of here.